but I'm here today. So, welcome and hello. I'm back with another chapter of The Sword and the Rose, and tonight I'll be on chapter 19. So, there you go. I'll just pop right into it. Chapter 19. Forsyth looked around. I'd have thought Malgathup would be at this meeting. I'd have thought so myself, said Gwalsor. But I'm certain he hasn't deserted to the rebels. No, I'd not thought of that myself, said Forsyth hastily. Not only that it'd be surprising that he hasn't been here. Gwalsor smiled inwardly at the way the accent shifted. Then said, well, we haven't the time to wait for him. The question is, what do we do now? We have the castle, but Marquian's men are between us and any reinforcements. Worse yet, we're not entirely certain of who will support us and who won't. Well, Mardel dar Hendrav and Fasket dar Lothual be outside with Dar Irrelevant. What of Kindle dar Esric? He's against me as well, is he not? Yes, him and Hordar Nantingon as well. Fidel dar Asinen and Nantis dar Yanel. They'll be for you, though. They may not hurry too much to come to your aid. Hodar dar Caralno and Loftus dar Matreg should be with you, but their holdings are small and they can't supply great forces. Even so, small forces are better than none at all. And what of Kerval dar Osalric and Matinian dar Narithal? I wouldn't be sure, and I doubt if either of them are sure themselves. Well, there is one thing a little more positive. I doubt Marquian will attempt to storm the castle. At least not until he's managed to muster his own manage a full muster of his own forces. True enough. They be building engines out there already, and I saw a ram being made and a ballista. So all that remains, Gwalsor said, is to hold the castle and try to slip messages out to those knight holders we think are loyal, trying to organize attacks inside and outside. Forsyth nodded. I'll look to some of the archer lads then. I think we'd best wait a day or two before we send anyone out. The rebels will be alert for a while, now that we've stirred them up. Brynjan still wore the brigadine, and had the sword belted at her waist. She saw Gwalsor's glance at the sword and spoke before he could ask a question. Marquian and his lot are likely to attack, are they not? And we have few enough men to hold the walls, so I will be ready to fight as long as necessary. Then suddenly, her bleak expression broke to be replaced by a smile. Perhaps I will set a new fashion among the ladies. Gwalsor grinned. And have the smiths all working themselves to death, turning out swords for the ladies as well as for the men? Now that is a grim thought. Then, too, think of the trouble the dressmakers will be put to having to learn their trade again, and this time in iron. The thought of a dressmaker, hammer in hand, wearing a leather apron over her dress, sweating over a forge fire was too much for Gwalsor, and he broke into laughter. Some similar thought apparently struck Brynjan, for she also began to laugh. Has Jadel talked to you? He was worried about you on the way in. Oh, yes, he saw me. She smiled at the memory. He took 2 eye-blinkings time to see that I was standing up on my own 2 feet, and then rushed over muttering something about, my Lord Baron needs me. He was concerned for his mother, but he doesn't dare show that to the other pages. Or to his mother, for that matter. Marquian dar Irrelevant came awake suddenly, knowing that he was not alone in his tent. Before he could call out, a hand covered his mouth. He saw a dark Lefetta features looking down on him, but before he could really ever even wonder how the man had gotten into his guarded tent in the middle of the army, a dagger pommel hit his forehead. Unconsciousness closed over him. Early the next morning, someone was rapping on Gwalsor's door. My Lord Baron, are you awake? There's a disturbance in the rebel camp. Gwalsor sat up. Just a moment. With enemies all around the castle and assault possible at any time, he had not undressed completely, so it was a very short time later he was on the wall looking out at the besiegers. There was at least 2 tents on fire, and the sounds of fighting were clear. Do you think one of our relief forces has arrived a little earlier than we expected? Asked Gwalsor. No way of telling, answered Forsyth. There's not enough light to see banners, and we can't make out any of the slogans. Melgathep was at the Baron's shoulder, speaking softly. I think maybe someone might find Marquis de Relevant in a tent with his throat cut and a badge of rival on the floor. The alliance was never very, very strong. Marquis dies, knock the center out. Gwalsor sharply turned to him. Did you? Melgathep shrugged. Hanged or knifed, de Relevant loses his life. You weep because it happened in the best way for us? Gwalsor frowned, and then realized Melgathep was right. This is the kind of thing I should know nothing about. About what, my Lord Baron? Gwalsor looked at his man for a moment, then nodded. Exactly. He turned to Forsyth. Would it be worth our while to do a sortie now, to add to the confusion? Forsyth frowned. Best not, my Lord Baron. Our folk have just had something of a fight taking the castle back, and we still be repairing shields and armor from that. Going into a night fight? That'd be bad business altogether. Gwalsor nodded. You're right, of course. Well. In the full light of the morning, they could see that there was still consternation in the camp of the rebels. I see Dar Relevant's banner is gone, Gwalsor said. It is, and so is Dar Henderov's, answered Forsyth. He clicked his tongue. Still leaves too many for us to fight. But you see how their camps are set up? I'd guess that none of them trusts the others. I've a feeling, though, said Forsyth, being careful of his accent, that they'd all join together if we rode out against them. We wouldn't be a very strong coalition, but we don't have a large force to take any advantage of their lack of unity. If our first reinforcements come up in any strength, then they might just fall apart. Gwalsor drummed his fingers on his leather cuff. Perhaps so, said Forsyth, but on the other hand, they find themselves held together for fear of reprisals if they lose. They spent the day repairing and refurbishing armor, sharpening weapons, and making ready for the fight that would come soon or late. Gwalsor, in the time when he was not seeing to his own weapons and armor, walked around talking to the men, hiding his own concern about the situation they were in. Brienne let herself be seen as well. She was still dressed in her brigandine and wearing her sword. The bandage was gone from her cheek, and the wound could be seen. It was not so bad as it might have been, a mere thumb joint's length across her cheek, and Gwalsor felt a stab of anger that Marquis had only escaped with a cut throat. She approached him. You appear troubled, my Lord Baron. He forced a smile. Only that we have no chance to be alone, alone, lady. She returned the smile. We could slip off to your rooms, or mine, and without a doubt someone would be coming to disturb us within minutes to tell us that more troops were arriving, or were fleeing, or the Grand Dragon of Cothermac was landing on the roof of the keep tower. She laughed. You're right. We best restrain ourselves until the time is more propitious. Gwalsor was awakened again in the middle of the night. My Lord Baron, Marshal Forsyth bids me tell you there's fire and fighting in the rebel camp again, said the messenger. Gwalsor blinked, wiped his hand across his eyes. Tell him I'll be there directly. Yes, my lord? What's Melga done this time, he wondered, as he put on the few clothes he'd taken off. Shortly after, he joined Forsyth and some others on the walls. What's happened? My Lord Baron, this man here was on duty on the wall. I'll let him say for himself what he saw. The man was a youngster, the sort who would have drawn this duty by reason of low rank. His face was thin, and a patchy fuzz was showing on his cheeks and chin. He was also young enough to be tongue-tied at the thought of speaking to his baron. Come on, lad, speak up, ordered Forsyth. The man glanced at the marshal, then back at Guelsor. All were quiet, my lord, when all of a sudden I be seeing these lights lifting and dropping among the tents. After a moment, I be understanding that they was a fire with arrows, and it came to me to raise the alarm. By that time, they be a fighting and a shouting down there. 'Twere worse a moment ago, but she seems to have fallen off some now. Guelsor nodded. Thank you. You've done well. And now I know fairly well what Malga has been up to. He turned to Foraith. They've been more trouble between themselves, it would seem. So it would. Is your man Malguthop not with you? I'd have expected him to be at your side all times in case they try to slip a killer inside. The Baron shrugged. At times Malguthop is at my orders. Other times he follows orders of his own. I have a suspicion, though, that wherever he is, he's arranged for someone he can trust implicitly to be watching over me. You know, if the rebels show such affection for each other for one more night, I shall be tempted to attack them, no matter what your caution you give me. If they do so, I might be urging you to attack, my Lord Baron. While they were talking, a messenger came up. Lords, an archer has come in through the postern gate. A man sent by Lord Vidal Dar Osinin. He waits below. Should I send him up? Guelsor and Foraith looked at each other. Dar Osinin? Perhaps our hopes of him have been rewarded. Guelsor turned to the messenger. No, we are coming down in any case. We'll talk to him there. Dar Osinin's messenger was a man of middle years, young, tall and slender. He was streaked with dirt and grass stains, obviously tired, but there was a pride in his bearing, as if he knew himself to be as good a man as any, in his own manner. Your name, man? I be called Long Headegg, Lord. That is, Headegg hand Headegg. What word from Lord Vidal, Headegg? Ye be over the rise to the northeast, my Lord Baron. Ye be bringing 15 horse and 30 foot. He be planning to make an attack tomorrow afternoon. He be asking that you set a smoke from the tower of the keep to keep in the morning. 2, if you be agreeing to the attack. Thank you, Hedag. Guelsor reached in his wallet and took forth a silver coin. Take this small reward. The man bowed. Thank you, my Lord Baron. Go find yourself a place to sleep, Hedag. You've done well. After the man had gone, Foraith spoke. I mislike all them smokes, my lord. Might not that lot guess their meaning? Guelsor waved his hand impatiently. It's a risk, certainly, but with the numbers involved, we have to coordinate our attacks. Even if we were to risk sending a man out to tell them that we've arrived, how would we know he'd gotten to them? No, we'll have to chance the smokes. The first of our allies is too important to miss. Have the fire ready to be lit in the morning, so that the smoke can be started just as we ride out the gates. They did not begin planning the actual attack until a little after sunup, by which time Guelsor was able to get a little more rest. Malguthop, arms folded, was leaning against a tapestried wall when the Baron opened his eyes. And did you have a productive night? Guelsor inquired. Malguthop's eyes lightened. Seriously productive. Sometimes. Nothing like a few fire arrows among the tents to help allies continue to trust one another. The Lafetta grinned. Took a few careful lads with bows along. That bunch outside. They're rivals when Marquian led them. Now that he's gone, they're even worse rivals. Maybe one sharp blow will make them all fall apart like a cracked pot. You'll have heard about the messenger. Oh, yes. Maybe all those gods red robe praise do something for us. Guelsor heard a slight emphasis on the word us, and looked at Melga sharply. You know something? You ever wonder how that lot managed their plot, and we hadn't heard a word of it? No messengers, but they all know who and where and when. And Guelsor was beginning to see where Melga might be going. And if a priest travels here to there, nobody questions his comings and goings. Nobody asks a reason. Priests were taking a part in this. Walser felt the red wrath rise up within him. I hear this here, that there. I ask a few questions in the right place. There's no sworn evidence yet, but more than mere guesswork. And you admit you have not one old red robe to be bosom comrade like your old songs say. True enough, but he keeps warning me out of priestly business, and here he is interfering in my business. Well, we'll deal with that in its time. Right now we have an attack to prepare. You leave them loose, let them do what they want, maybe make signals from the battlements? Gwalsor stopped. Of course, thank you, Melga. I am sometimes more of a fool than others. Take a few men, gather all the priests in the castle. We wish to protect them in case fighting comes into the castle itself. Do you understand? Yes, my lord. Melga went out. Suddenly, in the midst of all their preparations, there was an alarm from the walls. Movement in the rebel camp! As he rushed up the wall, Gwalsor thought, they've discovered our attack. They'll be ready for us. Hard on the heels of that thought, recalling his conversation with Melga, was, one of those priests has betrayed us by all the older ones. I'll hang the lot of them. When he got to the wall and looked out, at first there was nothing to be seen but a good deal of disturbance in the rebel camp. Trumpets were sounding, men were rushing with their standards. By the time 4/8 joined them, there was a small meeting of mounted men, several of them pointing off to the northeast. They've discovered Dar Osinin. 4/8 nodded glumly. They're going to be going off to fight him for sure. And what be our chances if they drive him off? We'd best do some driving of our own. Come on, let's get out there. Don't be too hasty, my lord. The numbers. Hang the numbers. They're sending off some to attack Dar Osinin, and we'll have to take advantage of that to mount our own attack. Come on, man. Once Dar Osinin has been driven off, we can only wait until they starve us out. Down to the courtyard they rushed. No trumpets, not until we open the gate, ordered Gwalsor. Orders were passed, men rushed to their places, horses were saddled, men donned their armor, and in a short time they were ready. The time was not short enough to suit Gwalsor, however, who had mounted and drummed his fingers on the cuff of his left hand as he watched the last of his people coming into order. Saldra's tears were too few for this. At last they were near as ready as he dared for. Gates! He shouted. There is no possibility of attacking out through one of the posterns. Not for an assault such as this. The main gates swung open. Trumpeter! The trumpet sounded, and the horsemen moved forth, trotting out the gate, deploying on the move into a proper formation, swinging from there into a charge. There was no possibility of catching the rebels unprepared. The alarm over Dar Osinin had seen to that. But, sending off the party to fight the relief force, they had begun to settle down a bit. The opening of the gate could not be missed, and men were rushing to their positions well before the attack could come home. A crossbow bolt glanced off the metal of Gwalsor's shield, and he felt his shoulders hunch. The smell of dust and roses was in his nose. Would that scent be forever a reminder of wounds and pain and death? He was on the point of pulling up his horse, whatever the result, when he heard a shout behind him. Laksoya! Not stop here for the target, young fool! He wasn't sure whether he spurred his horse or the flat of Melga's sword hit the beast's haunches. However it was, he kept going. He was among the enemy, and the sounds of battle rang in his ears, shouting, "The sword and the rose!" He hacked at the rebels' horseman, a blow that rang off the man's shield. Then he warded a blow from another side of his own shield, and was suddenly in the midst of a swirling mass of horsemen. Arrows flicked by to the right and left of him, and he turned his horse, frantically slashing at the back of a man wearing Dar Eswick's green and gray. The man went down, and Gwalsor urged his horse past the man in his own colors, who had been engaging that one, and set himself for the castle. Suddenly he was faced by a band of archers in green and gray, and just as he realized that he'd been completely turned around by the fight, he realized he would not be able to pull up his horse in time. And good sense whispered to him that, through his fear, that he did not want to pull up his horse. He crashed into the ranks of the archers, scattering them right and left, chopped at them as he went, a little less frantically now, but still intent on getting back to the castle once he had removed the danger to his back. And suddenly Melga was beside him, and another man on his side. The archers were broken and fleeing. "What now?" the man asked beside him. Gwalsor drew a deep breath, realizing he could hardly suggest they run for the castle, not with young eyes on him. He looked around. His horse was engaged, a little outnumbered, but His horses were engaged, but a little outnumbered, but holding their own. He pointed with his sword. "There! At them!" He looked at Melga a moment and shouted, "Loksoya!" and was away. Another crossbow bolt glanced off his shield, but he had enough control of himself now to realize that riding for the castle would merely allow some archer to have a good shot at his broad back. From the rest of the battle he remembered only snatches, trading strokes with the large horseman until his blade bit through the chain on the man's side. An enemy knight slowly fell from the horse, like a great tree of a forest falling to the woodman's axe. Feeling a blow on his back and turning to engage the man, only to be swept away by one of the eddies of battle, holding back his stroke just in time to avoid hitting Melga, who had come up beside him again. There are numerous unremembered or vaguely recalled strokes struck, some hit, some missed, some warded with shield or sword. When the enemy broke and began to flee, he pursued for a short while, then reined in his horse. Gasping, looking down at his bloodied sword, now nicked and blunted, he realized that his shield was near hacked in half. Older ones have mercy. When did that happen? Some rebel archers, unable to flee so fast as the horsemen, were calling for quarter, but were being cut down by some of his men. They were rebels, but he might need them badly in the future. "Hold your swords," he bellowed, his horse heading towards them. "Hold them, I say! Hold, or by father's boots I'll kill you myself!" And when they realized who it was that spoke to them, they held their swords, a little sulkily. There was then a good deal of reorganizing to be done. Weapons to be collected, whatever remained of the rebel camp to be cleared of anything useful that had not already been looted, and everything brought back to the castle. He encountered Forraith in the process and spoke to him briefly to him. "Is there any hope at all of us riding to help Dorosinian?" Marshall seemed a little less battered than Gwalsor, but Gwalsor knew that the reason for that was long battle experience, not any sort of battle fright. And that thought lowered his mood considerably. With swords beaten down to uselessness, armor and rags, and horses worn to a frazzle, not likely, my lord. And besides that, look to the sun. Whatever Osinians fought, it's long over by now. And Gwalsor looked up, surprised to find that it was now late afternoon. He nodded. "We'd best at least send a party of archers, the ones who held the walls while we are out, to see what news there is." "I'll be finding a messenger for just a moment." Much later on, they rode back to the castle. Gwalsor saw Brynin watching and waiting for them, and his heart sank as he realized he'd have to tell her what he had learned about himself this day. Later that evening, the archers came back. The captains of the party reported to Forraith and Gwalsor. "My lords, Lord Darcinian, he fought the rebels to a standstill for sure. They was both in their camps making ready to fight for tomorrow when fugitives from the fight year before the castle come bursting into the rebels' camp. They all pulled off towards the east. Lord Darcinian, he says he'll be following them after tomorrow. Good work. You and your men find a meal and your beds now. I doubt we'll be doing anything until tomorrow ourselves." By this time, Gwalsor had a chance to eat. Not a real meal, just bits of meat and bread and well-watered wine, taken between accepting one report and another. He'd done that only because Jadal had brought the food and drink, and declared, almost in tears, "My Lord Baron, you've got to eat or you'll fall over." Shortly after having taken the message from the archers, he was able to have a hot bath, which got rid of some of the soreness he felt. And though he felt a massive welt across his back from the sword stroke he had taken, it was time to meet with Brynin. He got the story out, finally, though he realized as he spoke that he was rambling and probably confusing her. When he was done, he stood quietly, looking at her face. He had no idea how to read her expression. Finally, she spoke. What are you saying, then? That I am a coward, that I have no right to inflict myself on you. Or perhaps you've thought matters over and decided that, given the present situation, you ought not to have anything to do with a member of a family which has rebelled against its own sworn lord? And you come to me with this tale that is supposed to ease my mind as you put me off? Whatever reactions you might have expected, that was not one of them. Older ones have mercy, no! I wouldn't play such a trick as that. It's just that I wouldn't have you saddled with someone unworthy of you. A shirker in battle. She tilted her head sideways. I saw you come back through the castle gates, your shield chopped in two, your armor slashed, and I'd say you've taken at least a severe blow to the neck, or to the back. For a coward, you seem to have been in the thick of things. Well, yes, but I told you about that. Malcolm made my horse jump forward, and I got turned around, and when I was trying to escape, and I ran into the archers, and as afraid as you were, you fought. Do you think there was a man out there who wasn't afraid? Save for a few who don't have the sense to be afraid of anything? Well, no. And when that man you looked to you for orders, didn't you tell him that you were about to run for the castle? Did you? Well, I suspect that if you talked to anyone else, you'd find that all bravery in battle is the unwillingness to let someone down who's looking to you. And once you've gotten into the battle, you didn't run, did you? No, don't bother trying to answer. I know. You realize that running would just make you a better target. She grasped his left wrist. Someone who's taken a wound like this has a right to be leery of crossbows, and a lot more besides. But you know what you've proven today? You've proven that you can face that fear and not have it master you. Next time you fight, it'll be a little easier. I wouldn't count on it going away completely, but I think you won't need Melga to keep you going in the right direction very often anymore. She released his wrist. And all that means that I don't particularly care whether or not you think you're a coward. If you intend to put me aside, you'll have to find a better reason. So then, what do you have to say? He found himself smiling. The way this conversation is going, I'm not sure how much I could manage to say before you interrupt to state you know all that and I'm being a fool. What if I suggest I stay the night? She returned to smile. If your back isn't too stiff, we'll just have to see, won't we? And that's another night and another chapter. So it's a long weekend, and that means that I'm going to be off until Tuesday, just because long weekend, extra resting, that sort of thing. But I'll be back on Tuesday with more stories. So I'll talk to you then. Have a good weekend.